Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the latest live stream over at the Angry Astronaut. Just in case, I want to make certain that the audio is functioning as per usual. Can we get a heads up from anybody who is currently watching as to whether or not you're able to hear me? And it usually takes a second. Great, excellent. Thank you very much, Ryan. I appreciate it. Okay, on we go. So, as always, we had quite a few votes from our supporters in terms of what the topic was going to be. I only just changed it, changed the thumbnail rather, to indicate what the topic was actually going to be. To all of you who are currently tuned in spite of the fact that SN6 is about to do its hop, thank you very much. I'm quite aware of the overlap, but I have these things planned, and I also have to make a video today as well. I'm releasing a video to commemorate us surpassing 100 videos on this channel. So in any event, I want to get that done as well for everybody, so have to fit it in somewhere. So in any event, I'm very excited, of course, about SN6. I wish them every success. But in any event, for all of you tuning in anyway, thank you very much. So all of that having been said, let's get right into the topic. Yes, we had a comment that, oh, well, thank you very much. Just commented that watching me and SN6 on the same day is a good day. Well, I know folks who would probably say otherwise, but in any event, thank you very much for the compliment. I'm deeply honored. So, the colonization of the solar system, that's a big topic. But the main thing I wanted to ask is, do we really think that this is something that's going to happen? I mean, obviously, Elon Musk is pushing forward really hard to make this happen. But as he has stated, he's building a railroad. I mean, that's essentially all that he's doing. And the Transcontinental Railroad here in the United States only successfully created a presence on the West Coast because there were people willing to take financial risks to go all the way to California to try to strike it rich with gold or create new businesses, that sort of thing. The metropolis of San Francisco certainly would not exist if it hadn't been for people taking those risks. So my question is there anybody else who has a lot of money that's really willing to take a risk on space, and more importantly, to take a risk on colonizing the solar system? And if nobody else is except Elon Musk, how is this going to happen? How is he going to be able to pull this off? I mean, he doesn't have limitless money. Starlink, of course, will supply a substantial amount if once it's up and running, if it ends up producing $50 billion a year as it's projected to do. But that's a ways off, and, you know, we're kind of putting all of our eggs into one basket. If we're just assuming Elon's going to take care of it all, he's going to pay for the ships, and he's going to pay for the habitation structures, and he's going to pay, you know, and he's also going to pay for us to expand beyond Mars as well. You know, is that really going to happen, or is somebody actually going to take the shot? Build it and they will come. I just got a comment. And yeah, you know, let's certainly hope so. Let's hope that once Elon has established a colony, you know, beyond the moon, that there are going to be other folks that are going to be interested, willing to take the chance. Certainly, at the very least, from a scientific standpoint, there are so many things that we cannot do. unless we do it in person. But scientific expeditions are not colonization. It's not, one and the same. Just got a comment. Hi, Juhid. I think it's been a while, actually. I don't think I've seen you for one or two of these. We will colonize parts of the solar system that are somewhat habitable, but there are many places we won't live at. This is going to be a long process, and Elon won't see it advance far in his lifetime. That's true. Admittedly, for the next 30 to 50 years, colonization isn't really necessary and will stay quite expensive. Yeah, I mean, that is, a serious concern. And of course, the question comes to mind, if we don't have self-sustaining colonies, throughout the solar system, or at least on one planet, there's a lot of very clear and present threats to our civilization that exist right now, that could take us down. And are we going to establish this self-sustaining colony that Elon wants before anything like this, God forbid, were to strike the earth? I mean, for example, I've brought up the potential, and Elon has too, in terms of what he calls the greatest existential threat to human civilization, which is artificial intelligence. Now, if that were to, turn against us, if AI were to turn on its makers, that could be very cataclysmic. What happens if this takes place before we're able to colonize another planet? It's kind of game over. So, we need to get this done sooner rather than later. But once again, Elon seems to be the only guy with the incredible drive. Launch cost to orbit dropping to $200 per kilogram should encourage low Earth orbit, orbital factories, industry, and colonization. That's true. Excuse me, throat gets dry very quickly as usual. Think of it like colonization of the east coast of the United States. Then the railroad starships open up the rest of the solar system. Several great filters, including some of our making, could even be AI too. Yeah, Framrick, I guess you were one step ahead of me. By the way, we have 82 people signed in so far. Thank you so much, guys. In spite of SN6 taking off, you're still tuning in. Thank you. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. It's very nice of you to do that. Tom has just made the mention that I believe it's in our DNA to explore, and at the speed at which we do is all up to politics and influential billionaires. And you know something? I kind of think that it's very much the latter, influential billionaires. And of course, the billionaire that I'm talking about, and it's not Elon Musk. And so, is this guy actually going to throw a substantial amount of money at what he's planning to do? Because obviously, and everybody knows I'm talking about Blue Origin here and Jeff, but in any event, their objective, I'm actually really all for it. Let's get heavy industry and damaging things off the planet. Let's put it in orbit. Maybe some kinds of industry can't be exported, but some can. Let's, build a huge commercial presence in low Earth orbit. But, at the speed yeah, Jeff, who, that's true. I mean, at $1 billion a year, which is what, Jeff is spending on this, it ain't going to happen no time soon. The amount of money that it's going to take to accomplish this is going to be way more than what $1 billion a year accomplishes. According to unconfirmed information, Elon has spent way more than that on just Starship development up to this point. And that's just to get these SN prototypes 150 feet off the ground. Just to accomplish that, he spent way more than $1 billion. And so far, he hasn't seen any money back out of it, aside from the $150 million that he got from NASA for developmental. That was it, or was it 135, something like that. But in any event, he's not seen a lot of return on his investment, and yet he's still throwing a lot of money at it. I mean, this is a guy with a lot of money and a vision, but there don't seem to be very many of those guys, and it's really really troubling. Does Blue Origin have any other investors? Yeah, they have tons of investors. But of course, investors, want to see a return on their investment. And here in America, that is a big problem, especially. Traditionally, American investors want to see a return on investment within 3 or 4 years. The Japanese, on the other hand, are willing to look at 10 years of return on investment traditionally, much more long term as far as they're concerned. But over the past 20 to 30 years, American investors want to see a return on their investment pretty quickly. And space has a hard time producing that immediate return on investment. Jeff will, one thing that Jew has pointed out is that Jeff will be richer than Elon for a long time. He should use the money like he is claiming he will do. I totally agree. I totally agree. And by the way, I have a video coming out today that's talking about a huge opportunity that Blue Origin could have if if he were willing to throw the money at it. And it could be a huge thing for Blue Origin if they were willing to take the chance. But as to whether or not that's going to happen, I doubt it. But in any event, that's coming. So Alien Zookeeper talks up, I think the use of lunar ice comes first, and I don't see a lot of people living off-world for a long time. We will have an economic basis for some maintenance and construction workers, some researchers in orbit and at the moon, but no cities for a few decades. That's entirely possible. In which case, let's hope that human civilization is able to, as we throw the dice every year with the future of our species, let's hope that nothing awful happens in the meantime. But yeah, I agree with you. Given the fact that it's been 50 years since Apollo, and we still don't have a presence on the moon at all. I mean, we haven't even gone there. Yeah, that's definitely something a good point to bring up. Homesteading Mars may be a way to help colonists finance their individual endeavors. Dole out land on Mars to colonists, which will gain in value as the colony grows, says Johnny Spacer. And yes, that's how the U.S. government encouraged the expansion west, the first manifest destiny, as it was called back in the day. That's how that was accomplished, was offering land, offering, possibilities to individuals. And that's how they got folks to endure the hardships of the planes. Now, people would argue that the hardships of Mars are going to be way, way worse. But there were a lot of unique dangers to, colonizing the West that Mars does not have. For example, diseases. Now, there could be diseases on Mars too. We don't know that yet. I may be conducting an interview with somebody who knows a lot about that. Some of my supporters know what I'm talking about. But in any event, disease was a huge problem for those who expanded west, and yet they still took that chance. Also, native tribes, Native Americans who weren't terribly thrilled about other people, colonizing their land. They were a threat that ended up being quite dangerous for a lot of settlers. And of course, there's nobody on Mars that's going to be trying to kill us once we get established there. It's going to be a matter of the environment trying to kill us much more than it's going to be our fellow man. Okay, let's see. World politics could really mess things up, says Tom. I do indeed agree, especially considering the current tensions between China, and I talked about this last episode, China and the United States, and with just about everybody else in the South China Sea that China is imposing their will upon. Tensions are getting really high, and who knows where that's going to go. But that could be a real showstopper when we're talking about colonizing the solar system if we get into another large scale war, even if it doesn't turn nuclear. Who's going to be exploring the solar system when we have a full-scale war going on? So in any event, do I think that near-Earth object recovery to LEO, lunar orbit, surface, or elsewhere will help colonization? Maybe like Antarctica research? Okay, I'll answer the first question. Yes, if we can establish a presence in LEO, then we can start colonizing the solar system. Let me tell you how. Excuse me. And I've talked about this before quite a number of times, and that's propellant depots. One of the biggest things that stands in the way of us colonizing the solar system is the fact that 90% of a rocket's weight is burned up in the form of propellant just to escape Earth's gravity. A ridiculous amount of a rocket's propellant, a rocket's mass has to go away, has to be burnt up before we can even try to get away from Earth. So if we have propellant depots, and quite a lot of them in orbit, then that's going to serve a huge purpose, not just for exploring the solar system, but also helping satellites to maintain their orbits once they start running low on fuel, that sort of thing. There's a lot of purposes for propellant depots. So that's one thing that LEO could be used for, and there's a lot of money in it. So in any event, that's one of many things. But yes, if we get established in LEO, once we have that part of the exploration process taken care of, once we have a solid presence in LEO established, then I do think it's going to make it easier for us to travel elsewhere. Now, going to the moon is going to make it even easier. You know, moon first, then Mars is what NASA has said. I do tend to agree with the concept. I think that it will make it easier for us to go to the moon first. But nevertheless, you know, all of that is kind of dependent on Artemis, isn't it? And of course, the Chinese have their ambitions too, but we kind of need Artemis in order to be able to make that happen. The diseases will not be biological, gravity, radiological, scurvy-like disease says going ballistic. Yes, I would say that that's probably true. But once again, every time I think that Mars doesn't necessarily have a biological threat, I always turn on the Andromeda strain. Sure, it's only a movie, but it is based in science. Michael Crichton was a doctor himself, and there, you know, we don't know what alien life is going to be like. Sure, it didn't evolve side by side with us. Does that mean it represents no threat whatsoever? I don't know if I'd want to gamble my life on it. I'd kind of like to study that life to make absolutely certain. But once again, yeah, there's a lot of argument to say that it's not going to be biological. Jeff needs the new Glenn before he can do much anyway. He might start to push more money to Blue Origin when Glenn actually flies, says Juhid. Yeah, if and when Glenn actually flies. Yeah, and once again, you know, what the hell's going on here? It's been 20 years. I mean, Blue Origin pioneered the concept of reusability, and yet the first rocket that's going to go to orbit anyway that takes advantage of reusability still has yet to fly. We still don't have a prototype. Well, in any event, I'll be releasing a video about that. Hello, another space nut. Thank you very much for showing up. Really appreciate it. And I'll tell you, just straight out, without this guy, this channel would not be what it is today. Nowhere close. He's been with me since I had fewer than 1,000 subscribers. And helped this channel to really take off. So thank you very much. All right. Alien Zookeeper points out that Jamestown was a company town founded by gold and saved by a cash crop. But homesteading wasn't a profitable thing until about a century after that. They came for resources, fish, gold, tobacco, lumber, and tar before they came from farms. Very good point. Very good point. So what resources exist on Mars that we can't get someplace else? Not a whole lot. not a great deal. Mars has a lot of the same resources that we do. So, to go there for resources doesn't make a whole lot of sense. The moon makes a lot more sense as far as that's concerned. But, the moon is the first step to colonizing the solar system, but are we going to take, the step after that? Good question. Okay, let's see. Founded for gold. Yes, well, gold was a big thing at the time. What is going to be the gold of the future? What is going to be the vital resource that we're going to need on Earth that isn't going to be easily found here, that can be found in space? Platinum is one example. 95% of the world's platinum is in South Africa. 95%, and it's very difficult to get at it, by the way. That's one of actually many examples of rare materials, rare types of minerals that are more easily available in space, assuming that you have the ability to get at it cheaply, which the Starship offers. So that's one possibility. And of course, platinum is one of a number of, as I said, of precious materials. Okay, this is a different comment. Interesting to see if Neuralink or genetic engineering will help humanity disperse across the solar system, says Framrick. Yeah, I would say that that both could make it a lot easier for us to expand across the solar system, if indeed that is what we intend to do, and if we're willing to make the move. Genetic engineering to make us more resistant to radiation, although I continue to insist that genetic engineering to colonize Mars is not necessary. That the radiation on the Martian surface is overblown. In space, it's very dangerous. But on the surface of Mars, not nearly so bad. Michael Crichton was a doctor that did not believe in global warming, says Going Ballistic. Interesting. I did not know that. Of course, then again, he died a long time ago. Confronted with today's information, who knows? He might have changed his mind. Hard to say for certain. Okay, in any event, is Mars more a humanity backup, says Framrick, rather than resources? Yes, I think that it is. And that makes it a very idealistic concept, doesn't it? That's, I mean, it's hard to get humans to think that, well, we could take ourselves out, so we better have a backup just in case. I mean, the average person doesn't want to look forward to the apocalypse, but it could happen. As a matter of fact, it will happen at some point. And that is a really serious consideration and a big reason. Well, obviously, the main reason that Elon Musk talks about when he talks about colonizing Mars. It's critical. Our civilization on this little mote of dust, as Carl Sagan said, does not have a chance in hell of surviving in the long term. There are very serious questions as to whether or not we have a serious chance of surviving for the next 500 years, let alone the next 5,000. We need to start expanding at some point. Otherwise, something about our own technology or some natural cataclysm or something else is going to bring us down. So in any event, now Mars is just the most hyped up step in exploring our solar system. That's a good point, Tom. We could colonize Venus, and there's a lot of pluses for that too. And nobody seems interested in doing that. I have to admit, there would be some pretty exciting things about living on a cloud city, but at the same time, I've got to see the Valles Marineris or Olympus Mons before I die. I probably won't. I hope to see it through some astronaut's, webcam or something like that. But I would so love to see these magnificent sights in a blue sunset as it actually happens. Wow, these are the sorts of things that I would love to see that are unique to Mars. Helium-3 says Spaceman Dan. Yes, indeed. Helium-3 is going to be very critical. Helium-3 is an element that is critical to nuclear fusion and a very safe form of nuclear fusion. Using helium-3 in the fusion process does not create neutron radiation, as many other types of fusion do. And so as a result, helium-3 is an element that allows us to create fusion without the problems of radiation that many other types of fusion tends to produce. But there's almost no helium-3 on Earth and all kinds of helium-3 on the moon. So the moon makes a lot of sense, and that is the first step, definitely. Asteroid Belt, thank you, Framrick, for bringing that up. That is a huge, huge point. Nickel, cobalt, carbon, and organic, water, the new currency of the future. And also, as I've mentioned before, the asteroid belt is a lot easier to exploit from Mars than it is from Earth. The amount of delta V required to reach the asteroid belt from Earth versus the delta V required to reach it from Mars because of the gravitational issues, that makes Mars a very big economic plus. There are all kinds of resources in the asteroid belt that we don't have in abundance here on Earth. And it's a lot easier to go get it if you have a permanent presence on Mars and you don't have to overcome as much delta V to go get it. So there's an economic reason for Mars colonization, in my opinion. Okay, let's see here. So in any event, if we want resources, Venus, this is what Juhit says, Venus makes more sense with robotics. Well, that is a good point. Venus is dangerous. There's no question about that. Anything goes wrong with your floating city, and it's lights out. Of course, at the same time, anything goes wrong with your life support on Mars, and it's lights out too. Although Martian life support can be subdivided into different sections, just like the Titanic, a terrible example there. But watertight compartments, shall we say, airtight compartments, one after another. So if one is compromised, the rest of them aren't, that sort of thing. Whereas if you're if your system that helps your city to float, whatever system we decide to use, fails on Venus, of course there can be redundancies for that too, and I'm certainly not an expert in the engineering that would be required to do that. But it just seems to me that a floating city might be a little bit more problematic in terms of safety. But once again, hard to say, hard to say. Yes, the moon is quite good with resources, says Juhid, and the asteroid belt, just beautiful. Yes, it is. There's so much in the asteroid belt. As a matter of fact, Ceres in the asteroid belt, as some of you folks probably know, has more water than Earth, at least according to our latest estimates. There's more water on this one asteroid than there is on our entire planet. So in any event, and if we're looking for water to help us with the colonization of the solar system, that is a very good place for it. And not just water to drink, not just water to break down for breathable oxygen, but also for rocket fuel. Excuse me. Ceres is a big C-class asteroid, I believe the largest in the solar system, and it contains carbon and it contains water, and if you have both of those in abundance, you can make methylox fuel, and you can make a hell of a lot of it. So yeah, that Ceres would definitely be a great place to establish the mother of all fuel depots could be established there. And by the way, To the Future just did a video about that recently, talking about step-by-step exploration and colonization of the solar system using fuel depots, and they mentioned Ceres as one of the most critical places to establish a fuel depot in the asteroid belt to allow us to go to Jupiter and to Saturn. And by the way, if you're talking about nuclear thermal propulsion, well, water has hydrogen, and you need hydrogen for nuclear thermal propulsion. So once again, excellent source of fuel even for futuristic forms of propulsion. And as I've mentioned before, the first test of a nuclear thermal rocket will be taking place in 2024. If all goes well with NASA and their next step propulsion initiatives. That's going to be something else if they're able to do that. Okay, let's see here. Yes, Mars could be an asteroid protection center for Earth. Interesting. In a far better position for early warning and or action. That's true. We got something coming from a long ways out. A big comet, for example, that gets hurled to the inner solar system by Jupiter's gravity. Mars could pick it up. That's a very, very good point. Comets, by the way, give off a radio signal. It was initially thought that the WOW signal, as some of you folks know about that, the most famous signal that may have come from extraterrestrials, it was thought that that may have come from comets just because comets give off such a powerful signal on the hydrogen line, although it is a broadband signal. But nevertheless, if you had a radio telescope at Mars that doesn't have all the interference that exists here, then yeah, they could pick up an incoming comet a lot easier. Very good point, FHM Consulting. Okay, Framrick, I reckon the asteroids are the new gold rush territory. Resources easy to move between. Yep, you can mine in situ or move them with cheap methanol rockets. Yes, very good point. I would say that, yeah, the asteroids are a big thing. And once again, I've said it once, but I'll say it again. I think Mars, that's the big economic push for Mars, is the fact that it's a lot easier to get to the asteroid belt and to exploit the asteroid belt from Mars than it is from Earth. Okay, let's see here. Now, Crichton was an unapologetic climate denier. Okay, I'm not gonna get it into that. But in any event, helium-3 does produce neutrons. Fusion is just based on probabilities. The highest probability is no neutrons. That's interesting. The diagrams I was looking at was showing helium-3 and a proton being released rather than a neutron. But very interesting. In any event, I'll be happy to have a look at that again. I looked at the helium-3 reaction diagrams and what was required. It's a helium-3 atom, and I forget what else is involved with that type of fusion in order to make that happen. But nevertheless, what about actual star hopping and going past the Great Filter, says another space nut. Yeah, I mean, if we can find a suitable planet, and very soon with the better telescopes that we're going to have, we're going to be able to identify habitable planets beyond our solar system. And that is the ultimate way of making sure that the human species survives. We may not be the same kinds of humans by the time we arrive at another star system and establish ourselves there with the huge amounts of time involved. But it is possible. There are many types of spacecraft that could make the journey. The Orion being probably the oldest example, which uses nuclear explosions, hydrogen bomb explosions to propel it up to relativistic speeds. Probably the most constructive use of hydrogen bombs that I can think of. But yeah, we could potentially build an Orion spacecraft now, although it would be incredibly expensive. And it would take some very committed people on board who would actually want to make the interstellar journey. But nevertheless, it is doable, and fusion makes the trip a whole lot easier. Okay, let's see. Spaceman Dan, is it liquid on the Ceres? No, it's not. It's ice. Yeah, it's way, way, way too cold out there. But heating an asteroid is using solar power is a pretty straightforward process. Although the asteroid belt is further out, and so therefore there's less solar power available. Heating the regolith on Ceres would produce reactive chemicals, including hydrogen, including oxygen, and then you would use the Sabatier method in order to produce the methalox fuel. And Elon talks about using that process on Mars in order to do in situ methalox, and you could certainly do it on Ceres as well. Excuse me. Are O'Neill cylinders or even a simple Bigelow module space station in low Earth orbit a good way to get started? Practice techniques or develop skills, says Framrick. Well, O'Neill cylinders are a huge endeavor. That's going to take insane amounts of money to create O'Neill cylinders. A module space station similar to, I don't know what the Gateway Foundation is called these days, but in any event, and I'm sure somebody can remind me real quick. But yeah, I mean, if we're looking at developing artificial gravity, these are the ways to go. Now, transporting artificial gravity on a ship is a much more challenging endeavor. Because you have to go big. Artificial gravity requires that you go big. Without going big, you get all sorts of side effects as a result of that. And speaking of side effects, there are side reactions which can create the neutrons as going ballistic. Very interesting. I'd really like to investigate this in greater, detail, because I read a lot about hydrogen-3, or rather helium-3, and its reaction and the advantage that it produces no radiation. So yeah, I'd be very interested in look. You've encouraged me to look further into the topic. Could we crash Ceres on Mars, says Spaceman Dan? Boy, that would be a heck of an endeavor. Ceres is a huge asteroid. It takes up 70% of the total volume of the asteroid belt. It is a great big asteroid, almost a planet unto itself. There have been some massive asteroids and meteors that have hit Ceres over the past, and yet it's not knocked it out of its orbit. So in any event, to bring it all the way to Mars would be quite an endeavor. And honestly, I'd rather put it in Martian orbit than to crash it into Mars. That could crack the planet open. It's so huge. Okay, Framrick says helium to helium-3 fusion is aneutronic. No neutrons, no worries. Okay, there seems to be an argument about helium-3 fusion going on right now. It's not the topic, but in any event, yeah, very, very interesting. Like I say, I'm encouraged to see. But that was always the biggest argument that was made for helium-3, was the fact that it didn't produce as much radiation or no radiation, that sort of thing. Plus, there are other advantages to it as well. But in any event, is radiation bad on Ceres as it is on Mars, says Spaceman Dan? It's actually worse. The radiation there, Ceres has no appreciable atmosphere, so therefore it is bombarded. Even though Martian atmosphere is so damn thin, And it would think that it would provide no protection. As a matter of fact, there are articles that have come out as recently as 2 or 3 years ago that I've read in space periodicals that say that the radiation readings that we've taken from orbiting spacecraft are going to be the same at the Martian surface because of those readings that we took in orbit and because the Martian atmosphere is so thin. And that's not true. The Curiosity rover has taken many, many radiation readings on the surface of Mars, and it's far, far less than Martian orbit. The Martian atmosphere provides way more protection from radiation than we give it credit for. And actually, if you're up against a cliff, the radiation drops even further. The Curiosity rovers read even bigger drops. The radiation levels at the Martian surface, depending on where you are and what the altitude is, you are somewhere in the vicinity of the radiation that astronauts get on the ISS. Hard to believe because the ISS is partially protected by Earth's magnetic field, but it is actually true. And I've released a few videos about that subject. The Curiosity rover has taught us a lot about radiation on Mars. But nevertheless, radiation on any planet without an atmosphere is going to produce a problem on Ceres. However, that having been the case, it is super easy to create habitation structures out of ice. And this has already been demonstrated by the Martian ice house, which is 3D printed. And on Ceres, the ice would never melt, never. And so as a result, unless you heated it intentionally, so as a result, you could construct a Ceres ice house, put about 10 to 15 centimeters of ice somewhere along those lines, and that would protect you from the radiation. So radiation protection on Ceres from using in situ materials is entirely possible. By the way, we have over 200 people watching right now. I am deeply honored. Once again, the SN launch or hop or whatever is going on at the moment. Thanks, guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in anyway. That really means a lot to me. Ceres, almost moon size, says FHM Consulting. Yep, that's about right. It is a huge, huge asteroid. Crashing it into Mars would be pretty cataclysmic. But once again, putting it into Martian orbit, if we could someday find a way of doing that, would be quite amazing. Quite amazing. So in any event, okay. All right, helium-3 produces the least amount. Okay, we still are talking about helium-3. I need to skip over that just because it's off topic. Okay, at least we can agree that helium-3 doesn't produce much in the way of neutron radiation. Framrick, do you think colonists will be allowed or encouraged to get pregnant or give birth in space? Lots of risks, particularly radiation, to development of fetus bone structure and organs. I think most probably, Framrick, we're going to be looking at giving. We're going to do experiments with animals first when we're talking about that. Before we start talking about pregnancy and childbirth on another planet. Yeah. Now, in terms of radiation, a pregnant mother could be kept underground, sort of a prisoner, I would suppose, of her own pregnancy. That's a sad thing, but she could be kept underground on Mars and exposed to almost no radiation. Until she actually gave birth, and then young children, that sort of thing, could be kept shielded from Martian radiation until they're a little bit older. But nevertheless, I would say that experiments probably need to be done on animals first before we plunge into that. If it turns out that we can't have children on Mars without problems that cannot be overcome, that spells doom for self-sustaining colonies. Self-sustaining colonies are not self-sustaining by definition, unless you can reproduce there. You can continue to get new colonists from Earth until all of a sudden you can't. And so, a colony just isn't self-sufficient unless colonists can give birth there. So that's going to be an important thing. And I do believe that our technology and the human ability to adapt is going to allow us to do that. There are humans on this planet, I was watching a video about this yesterday, that can hold their breath for 13 minutes because they come from a culture of diving without equipment, diving without scuba gear. On average, these people can hold their breath for 13 minutes. Try doing that yourself sometimes. Almost impossible. And yet, there are people on Earth that can do it because their ancestors did it, generation after generation until it happened. So in any event, maybe we use technology to compensate for the problems that children are going to face during their developmental years on Mars, until eventually human adaptation allows us to adapt to living on Mars. So in any event, also, going ballistic, okay, we're going to make one more comment about helium-3. It is the main reason, since other reactions are too hard to obtain because of the high temperatures and pressures needed. Yes, they're also, from what I understand, helium-3 is also best used in smaller types of fusion reactors, so that we would be looking at multiple helium-3 fusion reactors in order to produce a substantial amount of power. But still, if we were able to perfect helium-3 fusion, and then we're able to mine it on the moon, our power problems would be over. Excuse me, and that's something I got really pissed off about, by the way, on a recent video that I did, where I talked about the fact the billions and billions of dollars that we've spent on using nuclear fusion to kill each other, and the absurd amounts of budget cuts that the development of practical nuclear fusion has endured over the years. It's absurd. Okay, Alien Zookeeper says, we're going to the lunar South Pole for water ice. Is there any methane or source of carbon that anyone knows of? I want to see the Starship succeed. Methalox makes more sense than Hydrolox, which Bezos is building. Blue Origin's infrastructure around methane and especially carbon is the bottleneck for Methalox and LEO and the moon. And the honeybees, or the queen bee, which I've talked about. That's an asteroid mining robot ship. Actually, a whole fleet of them is the idea. And by the way, the company that's building those is looking towards using the Starship to deploy them. Pretty exciting stuff. You can theoretically make Methalox fuel on the moon. There is carbon in the regolith, although not a lot of carbon, but nevertheless, using the same principles of heating the regolith to produce reactive chemicals, and then the Sabatier method, it can be done. But there isn't a ton of carbon in the lunar regolith, so it's going to be more difficult to create it, but certainly possible. Would it be possible to generate an artificial magnetic field for spaceships or colonist dwellings with sufficient power? Asked Framrick. I really don't know. Oh, wow, they had to hold the SN6 hop. Well, how about that? Then more folks are going to be tuning in. So in any event, will it be possible to generate an artificial magnetic field for spaceships or colonist dwellings with sufficient power? That's a good question. And we have talked about that a number of times. Personally, I kind of think that we are, that an artificial magnetic field is probably unnecessary on Mars. The amount of radiation that is received at the Martian surface is not sufficient for the amount of effort that would be required in order to create an artificial magnetic field. Now, there are magnetic fields on Mars that take place spontaneously, but they're very weak and they don't produce any kind of serious protection against radiation. By the way, Framrick just sent out a reminder saying, don't forget to like and subscribe. Well, thank you, Framrick. I really appreciate that. Thorium, says Alien Zookeeper. Yep, that's an interesting possibility. Definitely a great source of nuclear power. Thorium exists on Earth, and if we could find an excellent source of thorium elsewhere, that would be a hell of a thing. So far, I'm not certain if we've found a huge supply of thorium anyplace else, although I would say that there's little doubt that there are asteroids in the asteroid belt that have it. There are places like 16 Psyche that I've talked about quite a number of times that have huge amounts of mineral deposits of all kinds of minerals on this planetoid. It is essentially a planet that went bad, leaving a planetary core and all the metals involved with that left behind. So that is a possibility. But once again, I'm not sure if we have found a lot of thorium elsewhere in the solar system. And if anybody's heard about that, I'd be very interested to hear. FHM Consulting, slightly down the line, but Neuralink may kickstart genetic mutations that trigger increased brain capacity and or reliance on the body bag. Could be a huge advantage in the evolution of Martian and space biological adaptation. Yes, indeed. Neuralink is just an exciting thing beyond all belief. While I was watching that whole thing with the pigs and the little, noises that were coming out when their neurons were firing and all that in the midst of the demonstration, that was a hell of a thing. Elon Musk is definitely obsessed with making science fiction reality. As a matter of fact, he immediately brought up the whole concept of storing memories using Neuralink, and then he mentioned Black Mirror almost immediately once this was brought up. Clearly, the guy is as into science fiction as the rest of us, I think. So in any event, I think that if anybody is going to make science fiction technology a reality, it's that guy, because he is totally into it. And I certainly hope that his descendants are as into it as he is. So in any event, Guy brings up, would it be possible? He says it doesn't block cosmic rays or ionizing radiation. Very interesting point. So yeah, once again, is it worth the amount of effort that we would put into it? I question it. I really do. I think that a thicker atmosphere would make a bigger difference, to be honest. And of course, we're talking about, obviously, we're talking about terraforming there. And yeah, maybe it's going to take a long time for us to get Mars' atmosphere as dense as the Earth's, but nevertheless, the thicker the atmosphere, the more radiation it's going to block, plain and simple. Tom says, I think humans living on Mars will adapt to the radiation after a few generations without genetics. I think that's entirely possible too, Tom. There are people, by the way, a very few people, who refuse to leave the exclusion zone in Chernobyl, and they're not dead. They've been there since the 80s, and they're still not dead. So, does radiation represent the incredible threat to the human species that we think it does? Kind of hard to say. Thorium would only cost $1 billion to develop. We did it in the 70s, says Guy. Huh. I don't know why Musk or somebody else hasn't tried that yet. Gates loves nuclear. Go Thorium. I'll add my voice to that. Go Thorium. Yeah, there's another potential topic for a video here. So I'll definitely keep that in mind. Thorium nuclear reactions for colonizing the solar system as a backup to solar on Mars, especially if we were able to find thorium on Mars. That would be a hell of a thing. Okay. Okay, Spaceman Dan is watching both. Well, how about that? Okay, so not a lot going on with SN6, says Ryan. Interesting to hear. Okay. Spaceman Dan. I'm sorry, I didn't quite get that sentence. Maybe just because it's early or just because I didn't get a lot of sleep last night. Sherwood Butler. I don't think I've seen your name pop up before. If that's the case, welcome. If we found a way to start terraforming Mars, what would keep the atmosphere from blowing away by solar wind? The one thing that would make a difference there would be something called a Dyson dot at a Lagrange point between the sun and Mars. That is the biggest way to do it, which of course would be a ridiculous engineering project, but it would partially shade the Mars from the sun and from the solar wind and its tendency to strip away atmosphere. However, it would be a case of a race, shall we say, when it comes to adding atmosphere versus the solar wind taking atmosphere away. It has taken an extremely long time for the solar wind to erode the Martian atmosphere to the point that it is. And as thin as it is, there is no point in the near future that we can foresee that the solar wind is going to strip away all of Mars's atmosphere. This process takes a very, very long time. So if we can start adding to the atmosphere at a quicker rate than it gets stripped away, that's certainly, it's a race we can win, we'll put it that way. But it's a race we would have to maintain. And it would be an industry on Mars that would essentially stay put forever, at least until we could shield Mars from the effects of the sun. Which would be quite an engineering project, as I said. Gunkeltron, hello. It's been a while. In the long run, colonizing the solar system is more like the first animals leaving the oceans for land, not just a grander repeat of European colonization of the Americas with less genocide. Very interesting point. Yeah, it's a huge thing. And of course, that process took millions of years. And I really believe that that human civilization doesn't have millions of years. So we're going to need to speed up this process. We really are, if we're going to be able to accomplish this. Yes, Spaceman Dan, I love the idea of putting a magnet in the Lagrange point to save Mars's atmosphere. It's a big engineering project, but once again, lots of jobs, right? You have to manufacture the ships, the materials to do it, etc. It could be a huge industry. Why not? So yes, that would be a way to do it. And yeah, it would take a lot of time and yeah, it'd take a lot of money, but even if you did it bit by bit, we could certainly accomplish it before the solar wind stripped away the atmosphere that we were adding to Mars. Okay, going ballistic. Why not put a big 16 penny nail wrapped with telephone wire between the north and south poles of Mars and a big D cell battery? Wow. Well, I guess the I guess that would be a heck of a lot of telephone wire. But interesting possibility to generate a magnetic field. Geez, going ballistic. That's what I like about these discussions is all kinds of interesting ideas that get talked about. Spaceman Dan, the pig's head, but each other more than humans. Okay, I got it. I have a spinal cord injury. Very sorry to hear that, Spaceman Dan. Would love the neural link shunt to restore function. I have no idea how much this affects you, but I'm very sorry that you have this situation. And yes, if Neuralink can create, can fix this problem for you and give you full functionality back, what a miracle that would be for you. So in any event, I certainly hope and pray that this is something that becomes a reality and that Elon Musk finds a way to make it affordable for everybody. I think that this would be a fantastic thing. Ricker, hi, how you doing? 1 billion for thorium in the 70s. Well, maybe not in the 70s, but certainly maybe 1 billion today. It's hard to say. Once again, these estimates, I can't attest to them. I haven't studied thorium enough to say one way or the other. Excuse me. Although my daughter will eventually be able to do it. As I've mentioned before, she just got a free ride to Clemson University. All expenses included, which is great news for a father in the United States where we have to pay for everything. She's going to be studying nuclear engineering, especially nuclear power. So in any event, she'll be able to tell me all kinds of things about thorium nuclear power here soon. So in any event, Guy says that's an estimate provided from Thorenson. So I'd be very interested to learn more about this. Once again, it's encouraging me more and more to make a video about this topic. Okay, so Framrick says it blocks charged particles. You need some nice shielding like regolith, water, plastics, concrete to attenuate photon radiation. So yeah, once again, the things that we're already planning, using regolith, using ice, using materials on the Martian surface to protect us from radiation, at least, when we're sleeping, at least when we're working, experimenting, etc. That's something that's going to provide us the protection that we need in the short run, and for a long time to come, I believe. However, as I've mentioned before, and I'll bring it up again, you could, in just a spacesuit, stay exposed to the surface radiation on Mars for 8 years and only have a 5% chance of cancer eventually killing you. So in any event, and that's 8 years of no protection, aside from a spacesuit. So it's really not the massive threat that everybody talks about. So in any event, if a restored magnetic field of Mars is used to capture the solar wind, could that be the energy needed to run the magnet? I've never heard of harnessing the solar wind before, although we certainly, solar panels, that sort of thing, but, hard to say. Framrick, how many people do you need to call it a colony? Is it when you grow your first crops? Yeah, when you grow your first potatoes and use your own shit to make them. And yes, I cuss on this channel a lot, so get used to it. But in any event, I'd say it's a colony, a self-sustaining colony when you have enough people and enough genetic diversity to create a colony. And that has proven to be roughly 150 to 160 individuals, non-related individuals, in order to produce a necessary genetic diversity to keep a colony going. So that all being the case, I would say I'd call it a colony when you have at least that many, and I would say 500 would be a safe number, just in case anything went wrong. That's what I'm talking about. A link was just put up from Guy about thorium. So in any event, these links are always provided and consolidated on the questions and answers forum after we're through with every one of these. So once again, if you want to participate in these discussions, ask questions, etc., it's all in the description on how to do it. And it's $3 a month. That's it. In order to participate. So, it's definitely something to look into. We've only got 26 minutes left in this particular one, but still, if you're looking to participate, it's pretty cheap to do it. Okay, so FHM Consulting, they have just released a study using bricks as a capacitor. Bricks on Mars could be a huge capacitor structure. Yeah. So, yeah, interesting. We learn new things about this all the time, and capacitors are going to be very, very important. Oh, there's another link. Scientists turn normal red bricks into electricity storing supercapacitors. How about that? And that's something that we are really, really, really going to need. So, geez, what a thing. What a thing. Because without capacitors to store the necessary energy, when there are dust storms on Mars that screw up our solar panels, unless we have nuclear power available to us or something along those lines, we're going to need electricity storing capacitors as emergency sources of power. So these bricks will make a big difference. So to get back to the topic, we've talked a lot about how to make this possible, the barriers that stand in our way, that sort of thing. But once again, Elon seems to be the big guy working on it. Is he going to be the only one? Is he going to be the only one that's seriously looking at colonizing the solar system, or are others going to follow? Let's hope that they do, because right now I don't see a whole lot of effort aside from Robert Zubrin and those who follow him, although I don't know if any of them are particularly rich. And it's going to take that kind of money and that kind of investment to make these things happen. We've got people typing. We have more people participating. So once again, thank you very much for being here. We still have a very sizable crowd. Like and subscribe once again as a reminder to you folks. Go to the description if you want to be able to participate. Because I am bringing this to you once again ad-free, and it is my determination to bring these streaming events to you ad-free all the way into the future. As long as my other videos and other sources of support continue to support this channel, I see no reason to put ads on these streaming events, even the recorded versions of them. Okay, so Ricker says, I'm partial to thorium. If it's true, the worst case situationally is safe for nearby astronauts. Taxation write-off would really help, says FHM Consulting. Yeah, it would, wouldn't it? And there's a governmental decision. We allow them to write-offs for the exploration and colonization of the solar system. I would say that would be a huge incentive to start colonizing the solar system. That's a great idea, FHM Consulting. Every government on the planet should look at that. Sherwood Butler, I think once Starship flies, people will start believing in Elon's vision and start working on solutions. It won't just be Elon long term. I hope so. I really hope so. Once the Starship starts making moving industry and moving human beings into space more of a reality, it's going to make things a lot more exciting. So we've got to get this Starship going, and SN6 needs to fly successfully today. So let's hope so. Spaceman Dan says, Elon is really inspirational. I hope he is the first amongst many. I agree with you. I certainly hope so as well. we definitely need more guys like him. And yes, it will be a revolutionary moment, as Framrick just pointed out. Alien Zookeeper says the most attractive thing to Mars about me is Phobos and Demos, however you want to pronounce that, for fuel, radiation shielding for hamster cage rotating habitats dug in a few tens of meters deep in momentum if we use tethers. Then we can export methane back to low Earth orbit and LOX from the moon. Very true. Phobos, well, you've heard me talk about it quite a number of times. Mars Base Alpha. As a matter of fact, I'm planning on producing patches and t-shirts and stuff like that with a patch custom designed, by the way, by one of our participants, and I'm going to put a link to his work into the description of this video and future videos, because he's just done some work for me, some pretty cool work. But he designed a patch for a future mission coming from a new space initiative in Scotland. And he's going to be designing a patch for Mars Base Alpha, and I think that that's going to be very exciting. So in any event, but yes, I'm very excited about Phobos and Deimos. I think that they are, especially Phobos, a natural start-off point, a natural place for us to go first before we start establishing a full-fledged colony on Mars. It will be Elon forever, says Going Ballistic. He plans to clone and a download. Elon lives forever. He becomes the first immortal guy on the planet. Well, yeah, I would say that if he can pull that off, he will. Space elevators a lot more plausible on Mars. Yes, you're right, Framrick. You are absolutely right. So in any event, yeah. Yeah, it's, and somebody just gave me a big thumbs up. Please send me a link to your site or wherever you do your work from, so that I link you properly, because I want to make sure to give you proper recognition and give you some attention. So in any event, space elevators are indeed a lot more plausible on Mars because of gravity, because of atmosphere. You're right. Colonize Mars, good to see you again. For humankind's future, we need to take this opportunity now, with SpaceX leading the way. It's probably the only chance we'll get, and I totally agree. Colonizing not only Mars, but the rest of the solar system. It is our destiny. We absolutely need to do this. And it doesn't have to be just about money, damn it. But, that's what makes the world turn around, doesn't it? But, if we are to sustain our species into the future, this is the only way to do it. This is the only way to guarantee our future and our long-term survival. If that isn't a reason to do something, I don't know what is. A live stream has just been popped on from Boca Chica. Not sure what that is. Don't know if they've scrapped the launch or something like that, but in any event, or I'm not sure what's going on. But anyway, a lot of summer students competing for that job. What floor, please? So yeah, I would say that especially in terms of working in space, a lot of people are going to want to do that, but they're going to want to come back. We are also going to need people who are never going to come back if we're going to look at sustaining colonies and colonizing the solar system. There have to be people who are willing to make that sacrifice. And I want to, simply because it's just been a lifelong dream of mine to end my life on another world and to contribute in any way that I can to the colonization of that world. And there are ways that I could. but in any event, maybe reporting on the state of things there, on a future version of YouTube. Who knows? I could be the first YouTuber reporting on the state of Martian colonization once it gets started. Who knows what service I could perform. Alien Zookeeper just brought up, someone mentioned that SpaceX could not go outside of the U.S. because of security issues with the rocket technology. This is actually kind of hopeful in that we could see competition and get more players. Yes, that is true. SpaceX has a lot of limitations. I do believe it's a lot of it because of their contracts with the military that keeps them from hiring from outside. So other companies need to start doing this. And by the way, the French are looking to produce a reusable rocket. But once again, and I get angry about this sometimes, the European Space Agency still does not seem to have much of a plan of a manned exploration. They've done nothing about it yet. And it's really high time for them to start doing something, as opposed to relying on NASA and Roscosmos to pick up, and now the Chinese too, to pick all of this up. Europe has the money, Europe has the ability, Europe has the talent. Europe needs to be doing this as well. So in any event, I would say that Europe has a huge opportunity to compete in this field. They just need to go for it. So in any event, don't have a site. Okay, thank you very much for doing that. So in any event, I'll make sure to post that. Spaceman Dan, I got my, thank you. Really quick, Spaceship Mania produces these. By the way, they also do 3D models of that. And I have links for Spaceship Mania and also for the folks that printed this on just about every description of my videos. If you're interested in getting one of these of your own, use the coupon code ANGRY10. That gives you a 10% discount on all products. Okay, so glad to hear it, Spaceman Dan. I'm very glad that you got your Starship in the mail. Okay, let's see here. What else do we got? Could be a lot of floors. Okay, yeah, no problem, Ryan. Okay, so Going Ballistic says, you can mail order a Starship. I'll have to dig in my coin bucket to see if I can spare $100 million. Yeah, unfortunately, they're this big. So tough luck, guys. Sorry about that. Okay. Yes, indeed. Thank you very much. Are we running out of time? No, we actually still have 14 minutes to go. Great. I'm glad to hear it. Okay, so yes. And a link has just been provided for the fellow who designs the mission patches. So once again, I'll make sure to have that put on this. And also, I'm releasing another video today. Believe it or not, yes, I'm releasing another video. I never stop working. So in any event, I'll put that link there as well. Okay, Ceres, Wormhole Alien, you're jumping in kind of late. Yes, we talked a lot about Ceres early on, but an excellent source of resources to explore the outer solar system. A vital point, actually, just because it is the largest C-class asteroid that I know of in the solar system. It comprises 70% of the mass of the asteroid belt. A lot of carbon, a lot of water, therefore a lot of just about any kind of fuel you can think of, including nuclear thermal fuel. Okay, yes, apparently the ULA having a reusable rocket, comments being made about that. This may surprise you guys, but I actually hope that ULA pulls off a reusable rocket. Yes, as much as I hate the guys, if they provide competition, competition is good for everybody. And I hope that they do pull off a realistic and practical reusable rocket. To compete with SpaceX. I don't think they'll ever do the same kind of job as they do, but nevertheless, it's time to make this the trend rather than the exception, because this is the only way to affordably get stuff into space. This is the only way for us to colonize space is reusability, reusability, reusability. That is the only way to make this happen. Side note, yes, thank you very much, Carl. I did make a mention, I'll mention it again. I intend to do interviews. That's going to be coming up soon on this channel. Still need to get all of these particulars worked out, but it is going to be happening pretty soon. So in any event, and it does involve, by the way, what we're going to be talking about today, hopefully. At least indirectly. We have a couple more people typing. Once again, if you want to continue to see content like this, especially ad-free, go to my other videos and you'll see how to do it. It doesn't have to be Patreon. There are lots of ways to support this channel, and it's all in the description of all of my videos. Going Ballistic says I should probably just change my handle to Going Snark. Okay. Are we running out of comments? Because we are running out of them a little bit early. We have 11 minutes left, and of course I could just rant for 11 minutes. I have a capacity for doing that. But nevertheless, I'd love you guys to continue to participate. We've got several people. Please rant, says Going Ballistic. Okay. Well, I've said it before, but I'm going to say it again. It is nonsense. It is horseshit that all of the companies on this planet have been so hesitant to invest their money and take a serious risk on economizing low Earth orbit and economizing space. They keep waiting on NASA to do it for them. They keep waiting on grants and fickle government money to kickstart them and stuff like that. Forget it. There are tons of wealthy companies on this planet that could be doing this on their own, and they could eventually turn a massive profit, especially if we're talking about asteroid mining. Look at companies like McDonnell Douglas and Boeing. As much as I hate them, they're incredibly rich, incredibly wealthy, and yet what are they doing to explore the solar system? What are they doing in terms of economizing low Earth orbit? They aren't doing jack. And it's ridiculous. It's absurd. It's unforgivable. And I know I just demonetized myself by saying horseshit, but I don't care because this video isn't going to be monetized anyway. It is absurd. And so, if we're going to colonize the solar system, if we are going to ensure the future of this species, the companies on this planet, the power brokers, the people who have the money to make this possible, need to get on board with it. Otherwise, they are sealing our doom in the long run. They really are. This planet cannot, our civilization cannot make it in the cradle forever. And by the way, there was a book published called Out of the Cradle 3 decades ago or more. I remember in the early 90s, I bought it, talking about how the human species can't stay in the cradle forever. And yet that's exactly what we're doing because nobody except Elon Musk is willing to take the chance. And it is absurd. If I could change something about anything on the Starship, what would it be? Okay, well, Ryan, since you brought that up, here is one thing that I would change about the Starship. I would make it more modular. And by the way, this isn't my idea, okay? This is an idea that's been circulating about. I would look at making the Starship into a 3-stage rather than a 2-stage vehicle. Where that nose cone is going, and by the way, you know who you are because I'm directly quoting you. So in any event, uh, forgive me, I'm plagiarizing you, but where that nose cone goes could be where we put the 3rd stage of a Starship rocket. And that could have its own engines, its own fuel supply for a powered descent into the Martian atmosphere rather than having to rely almost entirely on the Martian atmosphere to slow us down. I think that that's absolutely critical and something that would be a really big improvement to the Starship. Now, that would be a big engineering change, but if that's one thing that I could not, if that's one thing that I could change about the Starship, that's what I would do, and it has been talked about already. Shareholders do not see past the current stock price, says FHM Consulting. You're absolutely right, and that's why it makes me so damn pissed. It really does aggravate me. So in any event, Ricker says you got to interview Bridenstine. He's got to have an angry astronaut subdermis hidden somewhere. I don't think Bridenstine is going to give me the time of day, but you never can tell because a guy who I thought wouldn't give me the time of day happened to email me back within 2 hours saying that he would grant me an interview. Now, keep in mind, I have not gotten all the particulars hammered out yet. So who knows, this might not happen. But when I formally announce it, it's going to be exciting. So in any event, Gunkeltron, people with money willing to invest is one requirement, but why the hell can't Bezos launch anything into orbit after dumping around $20 billion into Blue Origin? Yeah, I totally agree. What's going on? I mean, this is ridiculous. Why does he not yet have a low Earth orbit capable ship? All he has is the New Shepard, which is suborbital after 20 years. Why? So in any event, Mark, yes, I'm glad you were able to catch the tail end of this as well. And you are quite welcome. All ready for 95. Interesting. Excuse me, I'm not sure if I've seen you before, and if I have before, please forgive me. You folks are becoming more numerous every day, and by the way, I am so grateful for that, let me tell you. Boeing never had an incentive to push the envelope with rocket technology, as they were being paid a large amount of dollars to simply circle the Earth. That is very true. That's very true. And it's sad that it all comes down to incentives, doesn't it? As opposed to idealism, as opposed to caring about the future of the human species. Why doesn't Boeing care about that? It's aggravating, but it's true. It's absolutely true. And they are, one of the worst offenders, but there are others that are also equally huge offenders when we're talking about that. Spaceman Dan, corporations won't do anything other than pollute for greed. People put emotions on companies and money, and brands don't care. Yep. Very true. And that's why this was the topic today. That's why I am concerned. Are we going to have people with the resources, companies with the resources that are willing to put that money in there because they're going to have to take a chance? They're going to have to take a chance on losing, their shirts and going bankrupt by taking a chance on space. But you know what? Elon Musk took that same chance, and look how rich he is now. He's one of the richest guys on the planet because he took that risk. I mean, come on. Just grow a pair for God's sake. And yeah, I'm getting more and more crude as time goes on. But nevertheless, it's true. It's absolutely true.
So Bride of Frankenstein. I guess I've kind of lost track of some of that joke. Sorry. Already 495 with another comment. What do you think about attaching a tether or cable to two starships, spinning them up to produce artificial gravity? I've talked about this. It's certainly something to be experimented with. However, the artificial gravity created by this is going to be a bit problematic. It has been shown that it's going to create disorientation, especially if you, depending on where you are on the starship while the gravity is being generated, anything you drop will deviate slightly, so you'd have to get used to that. There are some issues with doing that. And especially since we're only talking about, 6 months or maybe less to get to Mars, and human beings have demonstrated themselves as being more than capable of handling a 6-month journey. It may not be necessary. 6 months in microgravity, humans have shown themselves to be more than capable of handling that, especially since they're going to be going into 1/3 gravity as opposed to a full gravity when they arrive on Mars. Now, coming back, that's a different story. That's a very different story. And it kind of changes the topic. It should certainly be experimented with. Absolutely, to see what the practical side effects are and complications. The two hottest companies on the planet, says FHM Consulting, Apple and Tesla, got there by inspiring. They care about the big picture, so why can't anybody else? Absolutely true. And the big picture, what bigger picture could there be than the future of the human species? Come on. Yeah, what bigger picture could there be? And establishing a self-sustaining presence on another world is the only way to protect ourselves from some sort of cataclysm here. So, in any event, Boeing is a sheltered workshop, says FHM Consulting. Yeah, that's true. And sheltered by government money, sheltered by subsidies, but not as much these days. They've been losing one bid after another lately. I'm going to talk about one of those bids here today. But in any event, in a video that will be coming out very soon. Okay, wow. Time has actually run out. Finally, these things just zoom by. But I'm going to take a couple more comments real quick. Okay, first of all, the USA seems to have okay, Rigger says an overblown bottle rocket builder space. Okay. Affordable luxury SpaceX coach builders. Interesting topic. Well, it does need to be practical. It does, we need to have a practical use for the Starship. And I do believe that there are tons of practical uses for the Starship. We just need to focus on these because it's going to cost Elon a hell of a lot of money in order to get this thing developed. And he will need to eventually see return on his development. And I think the Starship should very well bring it to him. Wormhole Alien, I will be talking briefly about them today. I actually do have some concerns about their funding. And I'll be talking about that a little bit later on. I actually, when we're talking about Gateway Spaceport, I will be talking a little bit more about them in a video that I'll be releasing later today. Okay. Oh, how about that? Well, somebody else is starting to pile on Boeing. I'm not going to mention him by name because I really respect the guy, and I'm not going to call him out. But in any event, apparently a guy who is usually very polite to everybody on YouTube is starting to pile on Boeing. So in any event, so we're taking one more comment. Last comment here from Ricker. Unless you're not going to comment, but in any event, okay. So in any event, once again, thank you so much. We still have 178 people watching. But in any event, if, next Sunday we'll have another one of these. Okay, here's the last comment. Ricker says, my vote is no on linking spacecraft to one another with flexible tethers. Must be expansible, rigid tethers, or perhaps a truss of some kind has been proposed, something like the ISS has. That has been talked about. So that's our last comment on this particular topic. Thank you so very much for participating and so many people showing up. Boy, exciting is all get out that we had the audience that we did and the number of likes that we have. Really do appreciate it. If you want to continue seeing topics like this, well, you know how to do it. It's in the description of just about every video that I do. So until our species is ready as a whole to make this journey, to make this leap and colonize the rest of this solar system where we are the only intelligent species, although some people would argue that, but nevertheless, where we're the only intelligent species, and we are a precious thing. Intelligent life is so precious. We have to preserve it. And colonizing this solar system is the way to do it. So until we're ready to do it and put our money where our mouth is, I urge all of you to stay angry about space.